Hey everybody, this is your daily dose of all things royal. Welcome back, my gorgeous good-looking friends. We have a lot to talk about in this video, but before we get started, I want to share a quick little story. Many of you know I got a new puppy, and his name is Big Ben, but we call him Benny. And he's been a bit rambunctious. He barks a lot, he runs around, he wants to play, as puppies do, but at times it's been challenging to do videos because he wants my attention and all he's doing is barking. So I found a way to calm him and get some time in order to do some work. Check this out.
Coming after the king here, Jeff Bezos. Someone sort of pursuing relentlessly.
Yes, friends, that is Famous Fortunes playing in the background, and this is not the first time that this has happened.
For a relationship, let's say. So someone's pursuing for a relationship, trying to sort of expose themselves.
Benny is definitely a fan, and I thought I'd share. What he's not a fan of, and I can't even say it loud, is the M word. Meghan Markle? Benny is definitely a smart dog, and he knows evil when he sees it and hears it. And by looking at this photo, if Meghan's eyes don't tell you that she has no soul and there's just nothing but evil coming from it, then take Benny's word for it. Animals and kids have great instincts. Okay, now switching gears onto the real purpose of this video is to talk about the judgment that came down this morning of Prince Harry and 6 or 7 others like Elton John, David Furnish, Sadie Frost, Baroness Lawrence, Hugh Grant. All are allowed to move forward with a trial. Now, this was the case that we saw back in March of 2023, where Harry showed up to court unannounced, and then later on this year in June showed up to court to testify. So naturally, this is full court press for the media or the propaganda from the Sussex side to push out a certain narrative of Harry winning in getting this case to go to trial. And let's not forget that this is also a part of 6 or 7 other people in this lawsuit. Now, considering these Sussex sugar morons have an IQ about 5, they believe everything that the Sussex PR machine pushes out, and the propaganda that's now infiltrating the media at the moment, in which it's positioning this as a win for Prince Harry. Then on the flip side, we have people who know what a lying, whinging, deceitful, dishonest person Harry is, and upset that resources are being wasted now to move this case forward. We need to take a step back for a second and remember how the narrative gets spun when you try and control the narrative, which is exactly what the Sussex PR machine is doing at the moment. So the lawyers from Hemlands released a statement on behalf of their clients saying that statement on behalf of Baroness Doreen Lawrence of Clarendon, OBE, Sir Elton John and David Furnish, Elizabeth Hurley, Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, Sadie Frost, and Sir Simon Hughes. We are delighted with today's decision, which allows our claims over serious criminal activity and gross breaches of privacy by the Mail titles to proceed to trial. The High Court has dismissed without difficulty the attempt by Associated Newspapers, publisher of the Daily Mail, the Mail on Sunday, and Mail Online, to throw these cases out. Indeed, the judge found that each of our claims had a real prospect of showing there was concealment of unlawful acts by the Mail titles, and that this could not have been discovered until recently. Our claims can now proceed to trial. As we have mentioned since the outset, we bring our claims over the deplorable and illegal activities which took place over many years, including private investigators being hired to place secretly listening devices inside our cars and homes, the tapping of our phone calls, corrupt payments to police for inside information, and the illegal accessing of our medical information from hospitals and financial information from banks. We intend to uncover the truth at trial and hold those responsible at Associated Newspaper fully accountable. The judge also found ledgers showing secret payments by the Mail and the Mail on Sunday to private investigators, which had been provided to our lawyers and could not be used at this stage without the consent of the newspapers or the government. This only delays the inevitable since they will have to be produced in the course of the claim by Associated in any event. However, if the Mail and the Mail on Sunday have nothing to hide, and they genuinely believe our allegations are unfounded, as they appear to claim, they should provide us with the ledgers voluntarily now and let the claims proceed to trial as quickly as possible. On the surface, when you see all of this and you don't know anything about it, you're like, yay, go Harry. And if you're on our side who knows that Harry's a lying, conniving, deceitful person, we'd be like, ugh, can't believe that they're wasting resources. Exactly the response that we're getting at the moment. But we need to pause and filter out all this noise because this trial is moving forward, but not for the reasons that people think. The people who are behind this smear campaign that came out like 2 weeks ago and the folks that write for Byline Investigates are a part of this case, but not in a good way. So, being that Harry has so many court cases going on at the moment, I think it would be a good time to clarify which court case we're talking about at the moment. So, the case that we're talking about is the one where he showed up unannounced back in March of 2023. This was his publicity stunt. I believe that he was over there in efforts to try and see his father, but I'm guessing that he was too busy to see his son. Anyhow, Elton John showed up and he showed up through the back door, but there was no testimony by the prince or by Elton John. They were really there just to observe. So, this judgment that was handed down today is not to be confused with Harry's testimony that he gave back in June of this year. That court case was against the Mirror Group. The one that is in question today is with Associated, and that holds the Daily Mail, the Mail on Sunday, the group that is currently pushing the Harkle propaganda. For those that want to catch up and know what's going on, I've created a playlist that includes coverage of both these court cases from March 2023 and then from June 2023. Definitely check it out if you're a little lost at the moment. It's understandable if you thought that Harry's whacked out testimony was tied to this. Just because everything seems like a blur, just know that it's not. Even though it was ridiculous, it has nothing to do with this case. So there is a reason behind moving this to trial. And with all the propaganda that we're seeing, my guess it's being done on purpose to deflect away from the scumminess of it all. And it is, in my opinion, what I'm seeing here appearing to look like this is another grift. And Harry stupidly got sucked into it. And we all know that the influence was Meghan because in the other court case, he revealed himself to that. Just so you can get a visual of how this scam is set up, in my opinion, these are the two cases right now that Harry's attached to. I'm not sure if there's any more structured like this, but the one against MGN and the one against Associated Newspapers pretty much has a similar structural setup. And what I mean by that, we're seeing the same language, we're seeing the same lawyers, we're seeing the same resources that they use to help with the court case. So looking at the two court cases, there are a lot of similarities that leads me to draw the conclusion that this is a highly orchestrated scam that's going on at the moment. Normally, in the past, with these cases that have gone forward, the newspapers have settled out of court for an undisclosed amount of money. My guess is that they decided to go ahead and take on Associated Newspapers, thinking that they were going to do the same thing. And yeah, I mean, this is a grift at its best. The orchestration behind the scenes with various individuals that I've talked about in the past is going to be put on display and challenged. So this kind of opens Pandora's box. And from what I read here, it looks like this trial is going to happen, or this hearing is going to happen for November 21st, 2023. So thank goodness we don't have to wait another year for it. So now let's look closer at the judgment. Since this judgment that was handed down is 95 pages, we're only going to talk about a few things that I think are pertinent to understanding why this moved forward. So we're going to take a look at the parties and background real quick, the claims, and then going into the evidence as well as the reasoning behind the decision based off of what is highlighted here. So Justice Nicklin kicks off the following. Parties and background. These 7 claimants have brought 6 separate claims. In summary, they allege that each of them has been the subject of unlawful information gathering by the defendant Associated. They claim that Associated has obtained their private and/or confidential information using techniques such as interception of voicemail messages, listening into live telephone calls, obtaining of information by deception, and the use of private investigators, unlawful information gathering. Once obtained, the claimants allege that Associated has used the information to publish articles in the Daily Mail, the Mail on Sunday, and Mail Online. The claimants seek remedies for misuse of private information. Associated denies the claimants' allegations. I find it interesting, and this is just a side note, that Harry is suing the Daily Mail, but at the same time, he has been feeding them stories for the last year. I mean, this last week has been outrageous in the amount of stories they have put out through the Daily Mail. I just find that kind of bizarre. Anyhow, the claimants are all notable public figures who probably need no introduction. Baroness Lawrence is the mother of Stephen Lawrence, who was murdered in a racist attack in London. She is a member of the House of Lords. Miss Hurley is an actress and businesswoman. Sir Elton John is an internationally acclaimed recording artist, and Mr. Furnish, his husband, a well known film producer and director. Sir Simon Hughes is a former Liberal Democrat politician who was Minister of State for Civil Justice and Civil Liberties between 2013 and 2015. Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, is a member of the royal family. Finally, Miss Frost Law is an actress, director, producer, businesswoman, and fashion designer. What's really interesting here is the group of people who filed this lawsuit. As you can see, it was carefully crafted, in my humble opinion, with diversity. So we have the LGBTQIAFYZ added in there. We have Black Lives Matter with Stephen Lawrence and his mom. We also have politics thrown in here with a liberal Democrat politician. Then you have a member of the royal family who technically his father owns the court. Is it coincidence? I don't know, but you have to assume that there's a strategy behind everything. Identity politics seem to have a silent influence without having to do anything with it. So, for the most part, we have, in theory, the majority are minority classes being represented. Moving on, these are the claims that were mentioned in the case. The claimant's case is that through its journalists and or private investigators, blaggers, or other third parties instructed on its behalf, A, Associated widely and habitually carried out or commissioned illegal or unlawful information gathering activities for the purposes of obtaining, preparing, or furthering the publication of articles in its newspaper, and B, Associated carried out or commissioned the same unlawful act for the purposes of targeting the claimant, as set out in paragraphs below, exploiting or misusing the information it obtained in relation to him/her as the product or direct result of these unlawful activities and stories, which it then published as articles in its newspapers. The articles which the claimant relies upon are set out in Schedule ... to these particulars of the claim, the unlawful articles. The unlawful acts which Associated commissioned or carried out included the following: the illegal interception of voicemail messages, phone hacking, the listening to and or recording of live landline or analog mobile telephone calls, phone tapping, the obtaining of private information through deception, such as telephone subscriber details, billing information, confidential mobile phone numbers and ex-directly landline numbers, bank or financial information, and confidential medical information. The use or instruction of private investigators, also known as search agents, blaggers, or other similar third party or agents, private investigators, to commit these and other such unlawful information gathering acts, private investigator work, and the commissioning of burglaries or the breaking into and entering of private property in order to obtain information. As referred to throughout these particulars of claim, the unlawful acts were carried out on Associated behalf by a large number of private investigators, many of whom are now well known for carrying out the same unlawful acts for other newspaper groups such as Newsgroup newspapers and Mirror Group newspapers. These private investigators were instructed by Daily Mail and Mail on Sunday journalists, as well as commissioned or approved of by editorial executives and desk or department heads, many of whom are still employed by or working for Associated in senior positions. Unlawful acts such as blogging or phone hacking were also carried out by the journalists themselves. Further, Associated deliberately concealed or covered up these unlawful acts, both at the time, through the covert way in which they were carried out, the use of euphemistic language in payment requests and other documents, and the misleading presentation of sources in the articles, and then subsequently including through false public denials by senior executives on its behalf at the Leveson inquiry, who are still employed by Associated, in order to avoid its wrongdoing being publicly exposed and to intentionally deprive the claimant and other victims of knowledge of the facts relevant to his or her rights or causes of action against Associated. So now that we're caught up with what this is about, A&L tried to get this case thrown out, stating that the statute of limitations, meaning that it was too late, is the reason why it needs to go. Apparently, the justice thought otherwise. And a big chunk of this is the evidence and why he couldn't just give a summary judgment, but instead felt the need for this to go to trial. It says here, bullet number 206, the short answer to this is that these rival contentions cannot be fairly resolved by the court on a summary judgment application. If a limitation defense is ultimately relied upon in any claimant's case, will require proper investigation of the evidence at a trial. So what it boils down to here is the star witness in this particular court case, which is Gavin Burrows. So on the second day of this court hearing, everything was thrown upside down. And that was Gavin Burrows' admission that he did not sign those statements that were being produced saying that, yes, the Daily Mail had commissioned him to unlawfully do investigative work on, all the people in this court case. So Harry, Elton John, Baroness Lawrence. And naturally, this admission perplexed many people because Gavin Burrows really was the star witness in all of this. So what we see in this judgment is the justice calling out the confusion of having these contradictory statements, one for the Associated News and then the other from the claimants. And this is where oh shit, this is all going to unravel now that this is going to trial, because apparently and allegedly, Gavin Burrows is claiming that his signature had been forged on those claimants' submissions. So the issue that we have here, and this is what the justice had been echoing throughout this document, is that there is conflicting evidence from the Associated News and then also by the claimants, more so on the claimant side, because things are just not adding up. And throw in the fact that Gavin Burrows is pretty much the star witness in this, and his information contradicts what the claimants are saying, then, here you have a reason to say, it can't make a judgment on this and say, okay, you can settle out of court or, we dismiss this, but this needs to go to trial because things do not add up. And I think that was the biggest takeaway from this. What I didn't like was the justice questioning Gavin Burrows' truth. Hear me out on this one. So we see here, Gavin Burrows is giving, in green, a blank statement of saying, this is false. I was not instructed or commissioned by the Mail on Sunday or the Daily Mail to conduct any unlawful information gathering, and therefore I did not subcontract such work to others. As far as the claimants go, he writes, or he's quoted, I was not instructed or commissioned by so-and-so, the Mail on Sunday, or the Daily Mail to conduct unlawful information gathering on claimant so-and-so or his or her associates. I don't particularly feel comfortable with bullet number 42, with the judge challenging Gavin Burrows' truth. Says here, the structure, brevity, and precision of language of this witness statement would have struck me as odd, even without seeing the statement of Mr. Burrows filed by the claimants in response to Associated's evidence. Here's what I'm thinking. I'm like, the justice is thinking too deep on this. If you didn't do it, you didn't do it. Why is it necessary to add more detail when there is no more detail? Normally, if people are lying, people add a lot of detail to statements. If he didn't do it, why does he need to come up with a full-on narrative as to why he didn't do it? He was walking his dog that day. Like, that's not necessary, in my opinion. Take it for what it's worth and try and prove that he's lying if you don't believe it. This judgment of this structure, the brevity, well, that's too damn bad. There's no, he didn't do anything wrong there. So, I think that, perhaps maybe that's a little judgmental. Anyhow, continues to write and say that statement is dated 16 August 2021, so around 17 months earlier. Two things immediately stand out from this statement, in contrast to the later statement provided to Associated. First, it adopts a conventional narrative format. Second, the abundance of detail. Yes, so all the claimants' submission that had this so-called Gavin Burrows witness testimony in it were littered with a full-on narrative to make it sound convincing that all this stuff had transpired. To which Gavin Burrows is denying that he ever signed anything of the matter concerning Associated newspapers. So this is going to be a hot topic. And I believe this whole situation with Graham Johnson, Byline Investigates, and how they have been paying or forging documents in order to put these cases forward and try and get these newspapers to settle out of court is one big fat scam. And that's why, if this goes to trial as it is now, I think there's going to be some bombshells coming out. And yeah, my finger is on Graham Johnson being exposed for being a con artist once again. That's just my opinion. This guy, Graham Johnson, is a convicted hacker and self-confessed professional liar. And right now, it looks like it could turn into a criminal investigation where bribes had been used to falsify evidence for Harry's claim. I sure hope that Gavin Burrows gets his day in court. If what Gavin Burrows is saying is true and this was forged, I would be extremely upset because essentially in what was given by the claimants, it made Gavin Burrows look like a criminal. Quoted from Elizabeth Hurley's witness testimony, "We worked hard and slowly, but surely and throughout the course of 2021, details began to emerge of the litany of crimes Mr. Burrow had committed on the male's behalf. One thing that we know about Gavin Burrows is that, he has cleaned his life up. So to be accused in such a manner of being some type of criminal when he's not in this case, if this is true, it's got to be damaging to your reputation, especially since you've worked so hard to get it in a good place. I think he's justified to be angry about it. And I hope the truth comes out in this trial. And I think it will, as it says here, by the justice. The position that confronts the court is that Mr. Burrows has given two flatly contradictory statements to each side in this litigation. It is perhaps surprising that when he gave his witness statement to Associated, he apparently did not mention that he had given a completely contradictory statement some 17 months earlier to the claimants. As I observed during the hearing, that might be thought to be a classic case of a conflict of fact that could only be resolved at a trial. It certainly cannot be resolved on a summary judgment application. For the purposes of the limitation application, however, it is more a question of assessing the significance of the information Mr. Burrows gave to the claimants in 2021. And here's the thing, if he didn't give that information to the claimants, then they got a problem. But for those that want to stick around for the rest of this video, the last 15 minutes are from the video that I did back in March, just giving an explanation of how all of this is connected to the various people that are now supporting in pushing this case through, like Hacked Off, Graham Johnson and external PIs who essentially that have been thrown under the bus, like Christine Hart and Gavin Burrows. So if you want to continue on, it's another 15 minutes. But if not, then thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. And I'll be back with more content. But until then, please be safe and I'll talk to you later. Bye. And a lot of people started to attack Gavin Burrows by saying, well, why did you change your statement to saying that the Daily Mail never commissioned you in the first place? And that was not the case. So on March 18th, he's tweeting out that the BBC discussed him, that the BBC should hang their heads in shame. People like Graham Johnson belong behind bars. Again, on the same day, paying witnesses, that's an imprisonable offense. Even Harris, a greedy con artist. Then he tweets again on the 21st saying criminal investigation into hacked of board claimants, lawyers, and researchers, exaggerated, embellished, doctored evidence, bribes. At this point, no idea what is being discussed here. And back when he tweeted this, this was before the case even got started. So nobody really knew what he was talking about. And thanks to Paula M., she was the one who yesterday was the first to talk about this on her channel. And it piqued my interest. And when I looked into it and saw that now Gavin Burrows had pinned this article that was written, it now all made sense. The media needs to be talking about this because it is a serious situation. So this article apparently is from a news organization called The Upsetter. I've never heard of it before, but upon looking at it, this is what they're about. The Upsetter is not part of any lobby of journalists allowed to talk to the police, spooks, and politicians. The Upsetter is not party political or clubbable. It is self-financed and independent of media organizations, law firms, private investigators, NGOs, think tanks, law enforcement, and regulators to bring unvarnished news about how they all play the game. So there were two anonymous articles that were written about this brewing scandal with the network of lawyers involved with trying to sue A&L. And then you have the private investigators, which you have Gavin Burrows and another gentleman who was supposed to be turning clean, but apparently he's still corrupt, by the name of Graham Johnson. So this guy, Graham Johnson, had been around the circuit during the time the phone hacking scandal was around. He was a journalist for these tabloids and also had engaged in the same practices and behaviors with trying to get information. So then in December of 2014, this guy Johnson was given a 2-month suspended sentence for phone hacking. So long story short, this guy was prancing around trying to look like he turned over a new leaf and started to work with Byline Investigates as well as Hacked Off, which was an organization that was supported by the actor Hugh Grant. So Hugh Grant was also exposed in this hacking scandal, meaning that he was affected, and since then has taken up this campaign of trying to seek justice for free and accountable press. Hence, this nonprofit organization was formed. And being that this guy, Graham Johnson, went to prison, no newspaper was going to touch him again. So it appears that he was trying to look like he was turning a new leaf and trying now to help these organizations uncover and expose some of the dirty tactics that happened within the media. So according to Upsetter, is that he had been partnering with Byline Investigates and writing these articles, as well as supporting Hugh Grant's campaign, hence being seen as somebody who really has flipped and is now trying to champion and help for better journalism. So in 2018, Gavin Burrows is contacted by this guy, Graham Johnson, and they started to discuss various projects. Among them were books and projects. And they also talked about the litigation against newspapers for what the courts called unlawful information gathering. Now, keep in mind that in 2018, that's when Meghan and Harry married. And then subsequently, by October 2018, that's when everything started to unravel with the newspaper, such as Meghan made Kate cry and the story about the tiara. Things started to leak. So Graham Johnson, after connecting with Gavin Burrows, introduces him to a lawyer by the name of Anjali Sangani. So according to this article by The Upsetter, dated January 3rd, he confirms that he introduced Gavin to this lawyer, but he didn't state what the relationship was, and he also didn't say that she wanted to meet a key private investigator willing to talk about work for the Mail. What follows next is quite interesting that I think should be open for investigation. And it says, Burrows claims he was instructed by Sangani to conduct litigation research into the Daily Mail, one of his former clients. Then it says the well-placed source says this is inaccurate and Burrow is assisting the network of lawyers who declined to comment. So right there, you notice that something's fishy. Anyhow, the working relationship between Johnson and Burrows got closer, and they started to work on a book in which Gavin was writing about the dark arts for the media. And it was Johnson that brought in Gavin Burrows to do this documentary, The Princess and the Press, in which the BBC had Graham Johnson on as a consultant, which is quite interesting, and I'll explain that in a second. So back to the story, the relationship between Johnson and Gavin Burrows started to sour at the beginning of 2022. So the net of it, according to Burrows, is that he was a con man and he just couldn't trust him. So allegedly, it had something to do around the contract and the rights to the book that was being written. Somehow they got into some type of altercation in which, so by summer 22, Gavin Burrows took the first steps towards suing Graham Johnson and the publishing company Yellow Press. And it was for the claim for breach of contract. So I'm not going to get into the beef that Gavin has with Graham Johnson. What we have to understand is that Graham Johnson was setting up this grift in order to take advantage of this conglomerate in litigations, because there have been so many cases that have been settled out of court based off of getting information in this manner. Now they decided that they were going to make this super mega claim, which is where we have Elton John and we have Harry and Elizabeth Hurley and Baroness Lawrence all coming together. And I kid you not, when I saw and read this name, Anjali Sangani, I remember back in October of 2022 when this case first was announced and everybody was like, what? Now there's like 7 people in a lawsuit. I remember specifically this article. And sure enough, Anjali Sangani is representing Elton John and David Furnish in this lawsuit. As you can see, David Sherborne is listed here. Now you have to wonder, is David Sherborne a part of this network that is involved with Graham Johnson? So now that you know the background to this, we can now go back to this post that Gavin put up of this article that was written on Upsetter dated March 17th. And what this article revealed was the BBC's involvement of being in bed with Graham Johnson and manipulating this whole scenario. So this super claim that was being brought against the Mail was going to be the BBC's next project with Graham Johnson. So Gavin Burrows realizes that Graham Johnson's modus operandi was to ask private investigators to make an affidavit of what they've done for the various tabloids. And I believe that this is how they convinced Baroness Lawrence to be a part of this lawsuit. And I do believe also that Meghan and Harry were fully aware of the strategy and what they were trying to do. And the only reason why I say that, because all the projects that they were working on overlapped with one another. So for instance, in the Shitflix mockumentary series that these two did, in episode 3, where they were leading up to the tale of their wedding, they managed to manipulate once again, the audience by telling this narrative of how Meghan was so hunted by the paparazzi and oh, all the articles about her and the racist British media. This was the episode where they were sticking in some of the bullet points that were going to be featured into this case.
There was excitement leading up to the wedding, but she also had to contend with everybody else.
So, as you can see here, they're referencing an article, but what you'll notice is that this article didn't come out till 2021.
It's amazing what people will do when offered a huge amount of money.
So the article that they're referring to is this article from the New York Times, in which I will bet money that Meghan and Harry paid to have put in there, dated March 18, 2021. We know for a fact that the New York Times is a media outlet that supports Meghan and Harry's lies by pushing out their propaganda. Their PR firm, Sunshine Sachs at the time, was hooking all of this up. Who could forget the lies supported in the myth carriage? Anyway, in this article, the private eye, Daniel Portley Hanks, otherwise known as Dano, is featured, talking about his job when he had to investigate the details about Markle's background. So why does this guy look so familiar? That's because he was featured in the BBC, The Princess, and the Press, regurgitating the same damn story. Yes, the same documentary series that Graham Johnson was a consultant on. You bet your bottom dollar that Meghan and Harry knew what they were doing. And there you can see Graham Johnson's name as the hacking consultant in the documentary credits for BBC. But going back to the Shitflix series mockumentary, they decide to flash these headlines across. Notice
this idea that
who the organization they focus on. Yes, that's Hacked Off. The organization that is in bed with Graham Johnson. But let's twist the knife further, as we know that Meghan and Harry love to exploit others. So in this Shitflix series, they make a point to clearly talk about Baroness Lawrence.
Harry and Meghan Markle will attend a special memorial later to mark the 25th anniversary of the death of Stephen Lawrence.
An 18-year-old boy has been stabbed to death as he waited for a bus with a friend in southeast
Not far
London.
away, he and a friend were approached by a gang of up to half a dozen white
stabbed
youths.
by a group of white thugs in an unprovoked rape.
It was such an egregious, such an appalling, such a disturbing case that it became too difficult to ignore.
So this horrible tragedy is being featured in this Shitflix series to do two things. One, to solidify Meghan as the victim of racism in the UK, because they keep emphasizing how racist the British people are, and two, to also associate Harry with Baroness Lawrence on this tragedy. Because in the lawsuit, it will pull on the heartstrings because Meghan is a black woman and she was subjected to this kind of cruel, intrusive behavior. Whoever is behind this, no doubt, Meghan and Harry fully knew what they were getting into. And they used this tragedy and exploited it for their own selfish gain.
Hanging over this memorial, the terrible fact that only 2 of Stephen's killers have been brought to justice.
A quarter of a century later, we can only imagine the man who Stephen would have become.
And was this a coincidence? Definitely not. And shame on Meghan and Harry. I really do hope that the Daily Mail presses criminal charges, or somebody press criminal charges to get to the bottom of this, because whoever forged needs to be prosecuted. And those that were part of planning this litigation, super mega lawsuit, be exposed. So Russell Myers, this is a story more worthy than blowing smoke up Meghan and Harry's asses. And to be honest, I actually believe Gavin. He's the type of guy that you get exactly what you pay for and what is asked. And he will do right by you as long as you do right by him. And in this case, it sounds like Graham Johnson screwed him over, not only from a relationship perspective, but also from a monetary perspective, in which, you don't mess with that. I'm going to put the links to the 2 articles below in the description box. Please take the time to read it. They are a bit lengthy, but well worth the read to understand really what has been going on and what we're seeing now. It's not a coincidence that the press has been really silent about Harry's court case. Something's up, and I think they just want it to blow over. Maybe have this case be dismissed and people just sweep it under the rug. But no, I think we need to find out who forged Gavin Burroughs' signature. So let me know your thoughts, guys. As always, I will be back soon with more content. But until then, please be safe, and I will talk to you later. Bye.
I was such a fraud.